were scanning across the street looking to my west, and a brick exploding under my hand. And I thought for sure I lost a finger or something, but miraculously nothing was there. Just this brick was no longer there, and I had no bullet in me. And I said, you know what? Just missed me. I'm going to take a break. So I sat down and had a cigarette. My friend Nate Fox, who's sitting right beside me there, hey, you want another cigarette? I said, no, thank you. Next thing I know, there's a whoosh, bricks explode, and then it all goes black. And we'd just been hit by an RPG, and I was knocked unconscious by it. I was born in Salt Lake City, Utah, and raised in Walnut Creek, California. My maternal grandfather, who was in the Korean War in the Navy, my senior year of high school, I realized I didn't want to go to college like all of my peers. I didn't have that same drive to continue my education, and I realized that I could join the military. And for me, it wasn't even about joining just the military, it was specifically the Marine Corps. Initially, I joined to be in the Marine Corps band. I auditioned with my saxophone and passed and entered the Marine Corps planning to be a musician. I had inklings early on in boot camp that I wanted to change. Right after 9/11, wanted to do anything other than be in the band. I just remembered wanting to, fight for the country, and I just had this ping all along that I needed to do something different, that I didn't feel comfortable myself. I didn't feel comfortable playing the saxophone stateside while Marines were going to be deployed overseas. I asked if I could be disenrolled from the school and transferred to the infantry, and they were happy to meet my needs there.
Going through those weeks of basic training maybe changed your mindset a little bit?
I think it did. I really enjoyed the time in the field. I really enjoyed learning infantry skills, even the little amounts that we learned in boot camp, being outdoors, being with the guys, doing what I felt was real Marine Corps stuff. Once I got switched over to the infantry, I got sent to Camp Geiger, North Carolina. I spent the summer there learning more infantry tactics and being outdoors, getting bit by mosquitoes and ticks and everything else.
And then what did they do with you?
I got assigned to Camp Lejeune. At Lejeune, before deploying the first time in 2003, we did a lot of urban combat training. We did a lot of patrolling. We did a lot of direct action and ambush. We did a lot of training on Amtracs and amphibious vehicles. I remember one thing in particular we did the nuclear, biological, and chemical training. And I was the newest guy to the unit, my platoon. And so when they found that out, they said, okay, you're the designated guy. And I asked what that meant, and they said, well, if we get a gas attack and we're not sure if it's all clear, then you're going to hand off your rifle, and we're going to take your gas mask off and just observe you. Okay, so you're going to watch me to make sure if I die or not. And they're like, yeah, you're not important to the mission. You're the newest guy. And that night I went out in town. I got a tattoo that says "expendable" across my back. I had to laugh about it because it was either laugh or cry, and I chose to laugh.
When did you deploy to Iraq?
I deployed to Iraq the first time. It was March 4th, 2003. We flew into Mosul, Iraq that spring after the initial invasion had already happened. We guarded the airport for a few weeks, and nothing remarkable happened. I remember when we came back, just talking to friends and who were in my platoon and saying, man, we missed Iraq, we missed Afghanistan. Both these wars are over now, and we obviously didn't know what was to come. Before the second deployment, we focused on what they called stability and support operations, or SASO, and we were really just planning to be more like diplomats and go around, make sure while the rebuilding effort in Iraq was taking place that we could interface with the population and talk to the Iraqis and make sure their needs were getting met while we provided security for the workers to rebuild the infrastructure. When we were getting sent over to be part of the war, I just remember thinking, I've done all this training, but I'm not sure I feel completely ready, because I was nervous, and I think more than anything, I was really worried about letting my guys down. That's the most important thing to me. I didn't want to be a liability, and I didn't want to have anyone else get hurt because of me. By the second time we deployed, I was now one of the senior Marines in our platoon. I felt good about everybody around me, and I felt good about the Marines that were under my care too. I felt like my team was as close as any that we had in the platoon. So as a team leader, I was directly under the command of my squad leader, Sergeant Martinez, and as a team leader, I was charged with taking care of 3 others. So I had my point man, my saw gunner, and the assistant saw gunner. So 3 guys under me. It was my responsibility to make sure that they had different fields of fire covered.
Did you start to get wind of there's probably going to be a second Battle of Fallujah and we're probably going to be part of it?
I think even going into the deployment, we had seen the news coverage of the contractors who were dragged through the streets of Fallujah. It didn't feel like maybe until a couple months in that we really there started being a buzz that we might be going to Fallujah, whispers here and there. So a lot of the deployment experience was, we think something big is going to happen, and maybe we'd show up to a city and patrol it and nothing would happen. And so build-ups and letdowns and boredom. Even when you heard we might be going in Fallujah, myself and others were skeptical. It became very real in September when we headed down to Camp Fallujah and were told, look, something's going to happen. We're going to be part of something. It's important that you don't communicate this to people. And it's important that we keep OPSEC and we don't let people know, don't telegraph our movements here. And so they were being very cautious about like what we'd say back home, not censoring us, but just telling us like, look, something big's going to happen, more to come. We're going to do a lot of training. And so we kind of read between the lines that we're probably going to assault the city of Fallujah, especially in October when we were, at Camp Fallujah doing drills and practicing things and doing, urban combat, training. It didn't feel like maybe but a week or 2 before, as I remember it, that it really became real, like we're going now. It's gonna happen.
All right, guys, this week's sponsor is one that speaks to plenty of us. HelloFresh, America's #1 meal kit. If you're anything like me, you love great food and plenty of it, but really dislike grocery shopping. HelloFresh does the work for you, shipping you exactly what you need for fresh, healthy, hearty meals. Dig into their biggest menu yet with 50-plus dinner options and even more market items that suit any healthy lifestyle. And with summer in the rear view and school and work ramping up, we're all craving great meals that save us time and money. HelloFresh has something for everyone. Each box is fully customizable and includes pre-portioned ingredients so you only pay for what you need. It absolutely beats going to the store. Last night, my wife and I made sweet corn and green pepper chowder. Absolutely delicious. Tonight is beef tenderloin. Awesome meals, and everything I needed came right to me. And if you subscribe today, they'll include a totally free breakfast item with every single HelloFresh delivery. Follow the link and use our code AVCOCT10 and receive 10 free meals plus free breakfast for life. Scan the QR code on screen to learn more and sign up today. Thanks to HelloFresh for sponsoring today's story and making eating well a whole lot easier.
What's going through your mind at that point?
In my mind, before we went into the city of Fallujah, I started to think, okay, it's a good possibility I'm not going to come out of this, and it's a good possibility people I know are going to get hurt and killed. I couldn't help but look around and look at my friends and kind of guess, like, who could it be? Like, who's it going to be that gets hurt or gets killed? And what's this going to be like? It's not going to be as it is now. Now I have, a small but significant leadership position as a team leader, and I was just very concerned that I make sure my guys get out safely and that I'm a good leader for them. Failing them was the biggest fear. I remember watching the air and artillery hit that city of Fallujah and being really thankful that so much was going into, as they call, softening the city up for us. I also wondered how really anyone could survive the barrage that they put down, but I know they were probably dug in. The reality of how large the battle was going to be sank in, because I know we don't dump munitions just for nothing. If they're putting that much firepower into the city, something big is going to happen. So I think the magnitude of what we're about to participate in really started to expand, and I got a better appreciation that we're about to do some real Marine Corps stuff.
Talk about just making that initial push into the city.
You know, we went into the city under the cover of darkness. It was loud. Lots of gunfire all around, seeing tracers go overhead, and we're assaulting the city in Amtraks, these amphibious vehicles that, we're just riding around the desert with. We don't know exactly where we're going, in my mind. I mean, we're just making turns in a city, and eventually they're going to let us out. The ramp drops. I'm the first one to get out of our vehicle, and I run down the ramp, and immediately I get a step and a half, and I trip and fall on my face. Before I can even be embarrassed about, like this is my grand entrance into combat, and I fall on my face, I'm like, what did I trip over? Felt like a sack of grain or something. I look, and it's a dead insurgent I tripped over. It's like very, very quickly, a step and a half into combat, I'm already faced, with death right there. And so I get up and, brush myself off, make sure my weapon's still there, and, get everyone else off. It didn't really skip a beat, it was like you fall, you get up.
Let's talk about the next morning. Explain what was happening and how you guys responded.
What I remember about that first morning of daylight is hearing the mosques and the call to prayer. And instead of just the call to prayer, it was like there were these very intense discussions or very intense, speeches coming out of these mosques, and asking our interpreter, Sammy, like, hey, what are they saying? They're like, well, the basics are that this is your time to come and fight and kill the Americans. They're here, and it's your duty, for jihad. We're hearing this coming out of these mosques, very intense speeches, and, we're getting fire from different directions. I'm on the ground watching, RPGs go over my head and explode into buildings and trees. I'm seeing people blocks away, running across the street back and forth closer to us, bounding. I think the most poignant moment of that early morning was a group of women and some kids walking towards us, and they had these white flags they're waving. And I was telling them, Ta'al, come over here to us. Because our protocol was civilians in the battle area, get them behind us and get them to safety and get them out of the crossfire. And the look on these women's faces, they were terrified. So I was like, good, we'll get them out of the battle space right here. Get them into the middle of the mayor's complex. There's a lot of walls around. We can get them food, water, everything else. Get them a place to sit down. And there was these men behind them, directing them, almost with their hands on their backs, telling them where to go. And they were using these poor women to maneuver around the city. And I thought, okay, well, technically we could start shooting. I wasn't about to start shooting women, not even close. And we watched helplessly, and as these people were moved from one building to the next, and these guys behind him with these just crazed look is the best way I can describe it. Just trying to weigh the consequences. Okay, I didn't murder women and children. Good, check. Also, what are these guys going to do? Now they have the drop on us from somewhere else. We allowed them to maneuver. And so that was when the battle space became less black and white and more of a gray shade of like, okay, sometimes there's not a right or wrong decision we can make. It feels like it's not very clear. And so that was the first step into that kind of gray zone of like, well, do the best we can. I will never be able to prove this. But when we lost Lieutenant Malcolm on the roof, the fire came from towards the buildings where these guys maneuvered to. I mean, that was the first time I felt, I guess, what I call now is survivor's guilt. Like, what did I do? And the way, like, this never-ending loop in my head, as long as we had a downtime of, okay, Lieutenant Malcolm, who used to be our platoon commander before Lieutenant Barnes, a man who I knew as well as an enlisted guy could know, an officer there, was shot and killed. And did I fail him right there? And then also having to set that aside because you getting briefed, hey, next morning we're moving out. We're crossing Route Fran deeper into the city to push south.
You mentioned the order was given that the next morning we're moving out. We're going to cross the Fran, the highway that divides Fallujah. What was the plan to do that?
I don't remember the exact plan. This is where the real urban combat of clearing houses starts, and this is where the casualties might start piling up because we're going to have to kick open doors where people are waiting for us. This was what we called Haji Alley. So to clear house, first we had to clear the courtyard of the house. So a lot of these houses had gates and gated yards, and so we'd open the gate, either kick it open or use the latch. Sometimes you can just open the door. So we'd open that. You scan the courtyard, both the corners to make sure nobody was trying to get the drop on us there. We'd stack up on the door, and as quickly as possible, I would take turns with my point man of going in first, and then we'd enter the room in the space inside the house, trying to scan all the different corners up and down, left to right, to make sure that people weren't hiding, waiting to shoot us. A lot of the insurgents we faced, some of them were pretty brazen. What I remember about that first day is there were these guys, with bandoliers and ammo. Some of the guys would jump in the middle of the street, fire a big barrage of fire, and then jump back into cover. And what was really eerie is I would see some of these guys, take fire themselves as we were shooting back at them, and they get hit a few times, and some would continue to run. And so it spooked us out a little because we're hitting them and they're not falling.
Tell us a little bit about the Alamo, what that was, and
Sure.
the type of combat that was happening there.
The Alamo was a 3 or 4 story building in the middle of a large field. I remember assaulting this towards the objective there to take this house, and there's nobody inside it. We went firm. We held our position there for a day, calm at first, and then my squad and I were on the roof of this building, and we took fire from a couple different directions, from I believe the west across Route Henry, and from the south. It felt like we're taking fire from everywhere. I think what was happening was we were, they're trying to figure out where we were and how to best hit us, and all hell breaks loose eventually. 2 big moments for me there were scanning across the street, looking to my west, and a brick exploding under my hand. And I thought for sure I lost a finger or something, but miraculously nothing was there. Just this brick was no longer there, and I had no bullet in me. And I said, you know what? Just missed me. I'm going to take a break. So I sat down and had a cigarette. My friend Nate Fox, who's sitting right beside me there, hey, you want another cigarette? And for whatever reason, I was a chain smoker back then. I said, no, thank you. Next thing I know, there's a whoosh, bricks explode, and then it all goes black. And we'd just been hit by an RPG, and I was knocked unconscious by it. The best way I can describe it, it was very similar to the beach scene in Saving Private Ryan, where Tom Hanks' character, there's a blast and he can't hear anything, and then slowly it starts to come in and you can hear them saying, we got to get out of here, we got to move. And I start to be able to hear sounds, and all of a sudden it's a full-fledged gunfight. And I'm hearing Sergeant Billy Leo yelling. He just got hit. I didn't know how bad, but he's grabbing his leg. And so I see Leo yelling. I drag him off the roof, get him so we can get him medevaced. I was doing that before I really knew what I was doing. It was almost like I was watching my body move and drag him off the roof. And it's just the training set in. My bell was rung. I was concussed. It was very confusing. I remember bits and pieces of it, and this building we called the Alamo that day because it felt like we're making our last stand, like Davy Crockett and everybody just getting blasted. It seemed like just nonstop, every few minutes, another RPG hitting the side of the building there. The air tasting almost like if you chew up an aspirin. That's the residue from an RPG. And I just remember that being a distinct sensory experience and not being able to hear and just being, agitated, angry, because we're just getting blasted and there's nothing we could do. Billy Leo, he was from the Bronx in New York, and, he had this thick Bronx accent. He was very direct, a very tough guy. If he didn't like you, he'd tell you. And most people he didn't like, and he told them. I started to become friends with him eventually. He was the heartbeat, Remember when he got hit and taken out and medevaced, the morale of the whole platoon went dark because we said, we don't have him here. It just felt like we were all going to die. No better friend, no worse enemy than Billy Leo. He was larger than life to us. And, with him there, we felt safe. Without them there, we felt like sitting ducks.
How did you get away from the Alamo?
It was that night or very early the next morning. As we left, every time we were expecting to get hit because a lot of us were shell-shocked. Nothing happened. We didn't have to move that far to the next building where we ended up sleeping the next night.
What was probably the toughest day of the battle for your platoon?
I was on Overwatch with my team when Brad Faircloth was killed. And he was in a house that I had personally cleared 3 times. I remember just hearing gunfire, a lot of yelling, and then 2 guys running across, hopping the fence, and leaving, learning that Faircloth was hit and then he was killed. Hard to comprehend because Faircloth, Brad, he was a Marine's Marine. I feel lucky that I was able to give him the nickname we called him was the Barbarian. He was always out front. He was as brave as they come. And for him to be killed, it was hard to comprehend, the shock of anyone dying. But especially for him to be killed, it felt like something in the platoon died in us that day. Every Marine I've talked to, including myself, will attest. We love our Navy corpsmen. And Doc, as we call them, Doc Aponte, was no exception to that. And beyond being someone who provided medical experience, they also became the de facto chaplain, therapist, someone you talk to, like, hey Doc, I'm worried about this, and you didn't want the rest of the platoon to know. He held that confidence. Seeing Doc, there was nothing he could do. There was nothing he could do to bring Faircloth back, and he felt like he had failed us, and nothing we could do could convince him that, like, no Doc, there's nothing you could do. But just to see him take on the weight of that responsibility just absolutely crushed me. Essentially, a corpsman has to make a promise that's impossible to keep, to bring everyone back, to keep everyone safe. You said, Aponte, man, you're good. We know you got us. There's nothing you got to be ashamed of right here. There's nothing you could have done. And then we had what happens after a big gunfight, a lot of downtime, and thinking, okay, if he can get killed, who's next? Just knowing that one hurt. That one really hurt. It started to become like, okay, if he can die, how many times can I kick open a door and expect to live? At that time, though, I'd made my peace with death, fortunately. I have the pre-Fallujah experience of wanting to be in a big gunfight, be in a war, and then after, the reality is like, yeah, people will get hurt and killed, and they'll be dead, and there's nothing you can do about it, and you'll never see them again. I just know that'll be just a big void. And so we learned that.
Middle of the second week in December, and the battle's over, and you're still alive. How do you process that?
It's something I've largely been doing for the past 20 years. I'm still alive. I have to remind myself of that. Like, I'm still alive. Life still happens. And I had a friend, another veteran, who told me, it's okay to be happy. Even getting back out of the city of Fallujah and back into the camp, I went out to my friend Robbie Landers and, hey, where's Dave, our friend Dave Hawk? because the three of us went through infantry school together, and he was in Bravo Company. I want to see how he did. And he's like, got shot in the face, man. He's dead. Even though we were out of the city of Fallujah, we're still in Iraq, and I guess I'll figure this out as a civilian someday.
What was the turning point for you?
Yeah. I spent about 7 years trying to drink as much alcohol as possible and do as many drugs as I could to get out of my head and not feel either the horror of panic attacks or intrusive thoughts or remembering parts of the battle, or just the crippling survivor's guilt. My wife, we'd grown up together and she knew me. We were friends and started dating while I was in the Marine Corps. And eventually she said, look, I know that there's a good person inside of you right now, but what you're doing to yourself, I can't be part of it anymore. And we'd been married for about 4 years at that point. She said, you either have to stop drinking and using drugs, or I can't be here anymore. It was July 11th of 2012, I made a decision, no more drugs and alcohol. Then began this humongous journey of processing what felt like a tsunami of feelings that would hit me. Panic attacks, memories of death and killing, feelings of abject terror, like walking down the stairs and then all of a sudden having this full body memory of walking down the stairs and getting shot at, and at my house in Walnut Creek, California, going paralyzed, like on my stairs, just lying there and trying to breathe. So I faced all of that. Luckily, I had a good Marine friend who was part of the sober community who helped bring me to some recovery groups and meetings. And what can compare to being in urban combat? There's nothing. It felt like my life was anticlimactic at that point. But yet she'd helped me in such a way that I felt this tremendous hope now. No, I wasn't suicidal anymore. I had stopped harming, myself through drinks. And she said, well, what about doing this kind of work? And it was an epiphany right there. I said, yeah. If I can have this kind of hope, maybe I want to pass this on to other people. Since 2012, I'm a director of a VA vet center, and we see veterans every day from all walks of life and all conflicts. So yeah, I've been able to be someone who's gotten help from a vet center, and now someone who's worked at a vet center. So I'm both a provider and a veteran, and that combination can be a tough line to walk sometimes because I've had my own experiences, and I got to worry about transference and got to worry about realizing that I'm the one helping people, but I'm not invincible to feeling the same kind of the feelings they have. And so it's been a nice balancing act. Just what I do with the vet center gives me that purpose to get up every day and to love my family and to take care of my vets. I hadn't seen a lot of these guys for 20 years. The last time I saw Miss Kathleen Faircloth and some of these guys was at Kathleen's house in Fairhope, Alabama, and we're there. Bradley was getting a statue dedicated to his high school, and so we're there for that dedication. As soon as I walk up and I see him, it's smiles, it's hugs, it's like not missing a beat, catching up with each other. Sometimes we only know what each other's up to through seeing pictures on Facebook or social media, but the closeness, that bond, just as strong as it would have been if we had seen each other yesterday. As ugly as the death and the killing in wartime can be, the message I take away is that the bond of love and connection is so much stronger that it transcends all of that. That's why we're here together this weekend, spending time with each other. When you're with people in adverse situations and you form those bonds, nothing can break that, and not even death.